within the countries. We have large gaps, obviously, in this country, and I'll show you that chart here. But an important thing to look at is inequality adjusted HDI. And that's where they look at those gaps within the country. The good news is the inequality gap is slowly closing between rich and poor countries. The problem is the inequality in developed countries like us, that gap is getting wider and wider. So for example, the Jeff Bezoses of the world and Bernard Arnault, their income keeps getting higher and higher. Where the people at the bottom of the list, is their income getting any better? Obviously not. And that's what they're referring to with that inequality adjusted income. The gaps are getting wider and wider, unfortunately. Yeah, I just missed making the list. I think I was 13th on that one. All right, also a key role in your development, obviously, is how you treat 50% of your population. The gender inequality index, basically, we're looking at the extent that each country has a gender inequality. There isn't a single country out there that is apples to apples, where it's perfectly even. Even in Norway, who is ranked #1 overall, still has a gap in inequality.
Is there any
Sorry, go ahead.
That women are more empowered? Or no, it's always men. Men are slightly above.
Men are always slightly above. There's not a country out there that is equal, unfortunately. Norway and some of the Scandinavian countries are close, but no one's, like I said, 1-to-1 equal. And culture plays a big role in this in some of those LDCs. Obviously, the expectation is that women will not work, they will not vote, they will not run for political office, they will stay home. A lot of that has not changed over the years. It's getting better, but it's not great. I mean, remember, Saudi Arabia, women just got the right to drive a year or two ago, so that's how far behind they are. But really, the key to improving this is not waiting for men to make the changes. It's actually waiting for or encouraging women to get into political power and more managerial jobs where they can institute the change. Obviously, we've been waiting around for, well, now 100 years. Women have had the right to vote since 1920. And obviously, we're still not equal. I think we were ranked, I don't know, like 40th or 45th on that scale. We're not anywhere near the top. Part of that has to do with that map right there. Remember that? Obviously, in 2020, we will not have another one, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump in this election. We're still far behind. There's even been Muslim countries, Pakistan and Turkey, that have had female heads of state of some sort, prime ministers or presidents or whatever they use. Even a couple countries in Africa. Good chunk of Europe, not everybody in Europe, yeah. But we're still a little bit behind. But that's really going to be the key. If you can get women involved in political jobs and get them CEO positions, ultimately your gender empowerment will get better. But there's other roles to play in that as well. It's not just what kind of job they have. Are they given female healthcare mortality rate? Is an important statistic to look at. How many women are dying giving birth? Obviously, it's a good indicator of the healthcare provided specifically for women. You want that statistic obviously to be as low as possible. And the other thing we look at too is adolescent fertility rate, number of births per 1,000 of basically teenage girls. You want that number as low as possible as well. And you can see on the dark green on the map that obviously Africa and parts of Latin America have the highest rates. We're in the next shaded area. We still have a considerable number of teenage pregnancies. Again, you want that number low, because as we talked about during the population chapter, if that number is low, that's a good sign, obviously, but that means they're going to school, right? And we talked about that. That's a key component to development. The longer a girl stays in school, obviously, the fewer kids she's going to have, and the more likely is she's going to go to college and get that tertiary type job, which is in turn good for the economy. It's just kind of a snowball effect as it continues to roll down the hill. I added this map only because I saw this on the news the other day, and I found it interesting. When they tried to pass the Equal Rights Amendment in this country, they wanted to add an amendment to the Constitution where we would be comparing apples to apples. Women would get equal pay and everything else. And they only needed 2 more states to pass. It failed at the last moment, right before in 1972, before it missed the deadline to become an amendment. And you can see the states there that did not pass it. Basically, the South and one familiar state there out west. We were one of the states that did not pass the Equal Rights Amendment, or at least try to ratify it.
So
And there's been a movement. Oh, go ahead.
why would you not want to pass that? Like, just curiously.
It was interesting. The story I watched on the news, I should find the video. There was a woman actually leading the movement to get this not added to the Constitution. She felt it was a woman's duty to stay home. She would interfere with men in the workforce if they went to work and got real jobs. Wow. Yeah, it was an interesting video. It was on CBS. I'll try and find it. But yeah, it was actually a woman leading the charge to get that not passed. Kind of scary. Also, this was kind of thrown in. I wish the book would spend more time on this. Remember, this is the core and periphery part of development. This is something that could show up on this year's exam because it kind of, again, falls into all of the chapters. Remember, the core countries are the developed countries. They are the ones who are basically the takers. They're also the designers and sellers of products. But they basically are using the periphery, and that's the outside of that core. The developing countries, so basically Asia, Russia, Africa, Latin America. They're the makers. They've become the factories basically for those countries in the middle. And remember, there's also a semi-periphery that can be added to this model as well. Those are the countries that are getting more of the tertiary sector type jobs. Russia would be that semi-periphery. You could even include China in that semi-periphery, Brazil, Argentina, places like that. They're the developed, I call them the developing countries, where the really outside periphery countries are the undeveloped countries, basically all of Africa and the really poor parts of Asia. So don't forget to keep that in the back of your mind as we get closer to the exam. Any questions on the core, periphery, and semi-periphery? I know it's sometimes confusing. None? Okay. All right, question 3. Why do countries face challenges to development? This is Rostow. Basically, he came up with these 5 stages. I'll go through them quickly because